Good morning, viewers. Good morning, listeners. You noticed my voice, as Pat a moment ago remarked. It is mellifluous, fills the air like the sound of a mighty bell, calling the
Yeah.
faithful to listen to what's
Uh,
going on.
in other words, it's back to normal.
Anyway, how's the
By the
farm
way,
today, Pat?
just something to come into my head before we start because we were discussing before we came on air what we were going to say, and I just something. Did you see that the only one person dominating the world news cycle is our friend Trump? Did you see yesterday or somewhere last night he defended the attack? I think is it called Suma or somewhere that we attacking Ukraine that killed 34 people. There are bodies of children on the street. People going to Palm Sunday, 117 injured. Trump says Putin told him it was a mistake. What under God has Putin got on Trump? Like he's actually excusing what happened. Can you? He wouldn't have done it for the Gazans, or
He doesn't even mention them. Doesn't even mention them. To tell you the truth, Pat, I think our attention is more fixed on the suffering there, and there is suffering. Those people with their faces covered in blood, and I'm sure there was an awful lot of corpses. But that gets attention because it's different from Gaza. Gaza is just
yeah,
an anonymous mass of corpses,
aye,
really.
yeah.
And we pick up our ears. We hear, "Oh, Christians going to Sunday worship, Palm Sunday,
Yeah.
etc." Not that they, I
But
mean,
Jude, by the way, yesterday you mentioned that apparently there was 500 or 700 army people in Israel over the weekend signed a letter saying, "Why are we still bombing? And Gaza? Like, Jude, what's left to bomb?
who
You know, it's
signed that, Pat? Who signed that?
I think it's about 500, seven
Oh,
hundred
yes.
military
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
like a pilots signed one, an Air Force people signed one. They said Netanyahu is keeping it going for political reasons because he could face jail. I don't think that'll ever happen, by the way. But he's up on corruption charges and all the rest, and he's trying to change the judiciary that he's not accountable to them. So a lot of Israelis are saying he is cynically using the war in Gaza for his own political ends,
Hmm.
which
What
whatever.
do you think? What is there to say about a man who, in his own country, is being, he's staying in power and not being prosecuted because he's doing all sorts of tricky stuff, and then abroad, he's supposed to be arrested if he goes to a number of countries. So at home and abroad, he's a criminal. He's a
He
homicidal
tried to
criminal.
sack the head of Shin Bet, and apparently that's been blocked by the courts and so on. But by the way, Judah, here's another thing. I know we're going to move on to other things, but just a couple of things. Susan Myers was the U.S. commander in Greenland, and J.D. Vance arrived there about what 2 weeks ago,
I
and
remember
uninvited and was unwelcome.
that.
And he said that, and he made it a couple of attacks on Denmark, saying they had done nothing to prevent aggressive incursions by China and Russia, which is absolute bollocks. And anyway, Myers, who's the commander, a woman, Susan Myers, she's the commander of the big army base there. She sent around an email to staff there. She says, "This was not our," she said, "I don't understand the politics of all this," but she says, "We have no knowledge of what he's on about."
Hmm.
Apparently, somebody leaked it to the Pentagon, and she was fired almost immediately. They said that anybody who was going against President Trump's agenda was not. No, they were going against the chain of command, and they were subverting American interests. So she's fired for an email saying, "Look, but Vance, who's a bollocks, who clearly knows nothing about international matters." In other words, she was sacked for saying something that was true.
What did she say that she got sacked for?
Basically, she said that what Vance said to the media about, that he had said that Denmark had not looked after Greenland's well, that they had failed to prevent aggressive incursions, I think was the expression he used, if I remember correctly, by China and Russia. And the woman, Susan Myers, says she's not aware of any aggressive incursions into Greenland by either Russia or the rest of it. And she's, well, as far as we're concerned, the base. She said something along, and I need to go look it up. But she says basically, I don't understand what the politics are here, but she says, well, the reality on the ground, this is not true. And the Pentagon got hold of this, and she was fired almost immediately.
Huh.
They said she was subverting President Trump's agenda.
But doesn't am I wrong now? Doesn't the US have a big base in Greenland?
That's she's in charge of that base.
For
She's,
God's
in
sake.
other words,
So the Yanks have a big base in Greenland. The woman says, no, other countries haven't come in and established bases.
yeah,
And she gets fired. Oh, what?
yeah.
I
That's
mean,
how insane it is. Yeah.
Jesus, that's ridiculous. Why did they ever, I wonder, why did Greenland allow them to build a base? I mean, they wouldn't, for example, in your free part of Ireland, in the free state, you wouldn't allow, would you?
Unoccupied.
You wouldn't allow an American base to be established.
No, but you see, I'd say that in the days of the Cold War, literally up there, um, there were a big fear in Europe and America of Russians coming across the pond type thing.
Yeah.
And I'd say Greenland, sure, there's only, what is it, 57 or 58,000 people in
Oh,
Greenland.
is that what that's
And
a
there's
hangover
only,
from that then, is it?
yeah, I presume that's what it is. So
Hmm.
they said American base was a deterrent from the Russians coming in, and
Oh,
Denmark was quite happy to allow that to happen.
uh,
But anyway, the Danes are not happy about the Americans, and neither are the Greenlanders, because, of course, Trump says Greenland is vital for America's
uh,
long-term security. What he means is it's not vital for America's long, and it means he wants to get the oil and the gas and the rare earth stuff
hmm,
underneath it.
hmm,
That's really what he wants.
hmm. This thing about bases, American bases in places. You remember the what are they called? Greenham Common women,
Women, yeah, yeah,
where the Americans had the base with nuclear weapons in it, as far
yeah,
as I remember.
yeah,
I
yeah,
know that goes back very far. It's funny how you learn to, you're sort of taught to accept things that are really odd when you think about it. When I was a student, we used to go over in the summer and work in factories, and one of the factories was Huntingdon.
yeah,
And come Sundays, we really were. This is Derry guys who have gone to St. Columns. On Sundays, we walked at least a mile or 2 miles to Bath, and nobody,
mm,
nobody said, none of the boys said, geez, I'm not going to walk there this time. No,
mm,
everybody went. But where was the Mass? The Mass was on an American base
yeah,
in Huntingdon. And in fact, I
yeah,
remember we didn't shave. We just were working day and night to make money.
yeah,
And we'd walked, as I say, 2 miles to get to Mass. And we were approaching the chapel, and this, I was going to say a rude word about this American officer, said, "Hey, you
mm,
guys, you want to smarten up? Get a shave and wear a tie. Show some respect here." And
mm.
what did we say? Nothing. We put our heads down and we walked into the chapel.
I was about to say, Jude, what did they say when you told them to fuck off?
Well, if I ever get a time machine, I will use it for that sole purpose to make that journey and resurrect that man and say, listen, mate, you know what you can do with your
Yeah.
smarting up
Uh,
stuff. Okay, talking about smart and being up, Rory McIlroy wins
yeah.
the Masters. I have
Yeah,
heard your
I think
stunning news.
I didn't see it, but I
Why
was
did you
listening
not
to it
stay
all
up?
morning.
It was on until 1 o'clock. You could have watched it, Pat.
Jude, I forgot all
Where's your
about it. But
priority list? Where's your priorities?
priority. No, but I was listening to RT. It's the main headline on the RT news. That's how important it is. But he
Everywhere,
joins.
everywhere.
He joins Ben. I don't remember them all, but Ben Hogan, Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, Tiger Woods, and there's someone about Gene Saracen. Jeez, where did I bring that one out of? I don't remember that. And but now Rory, I think it's only, is it 5 or 6
The
people have
five,
ever
and
done
he's
it?
the sixth. I think he's the sixth.
He's a six eye. So like Japers did, it is some achievement in the world of golf. And like I watched him on a couple of occasions. Now he's not my favorite sports star by any means.
Why? Why? Why?
I
Why,
am
young
very ambivalent when it
35-year-old?
comes to
What have you got against him?
Hey,
What have you got against him? Why is he
there's
not your
there's
idol?
Jude, I have a big problem with people who seem to deny they're Irish. And Rory, as a great pains to sort of walk this line, that remember he refused. He found some excuse not to represent Ireland at the Olympics one
Yep.
occasion, and even though it was his father or his uncle played GAA for I was it
Oh, I'm
Down.
sure.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he never. I don't think he's ever been seen at a GA match, but he always goes to the old rugby match. I think he wants to know that Castle Catholic type thing, and I I guess I'm open to admit it. If he wants to be British, go ahead and be British. But see this sort of keeping all your options open. Like I detest that. Why doesn't he say either actually I'm pro, I'm unionist, or I'm Catholic? But this sort of walking on eggshells, saying I'm neither. Like I think, like that's just for me.
Well,
That I've always sort of detested that.
you better stay
That's
away
my
from
wee bit of
Hollywood.
bigotry out of the way for today.
Stay away from. I would suggest you stay away from Hollywood then, which is where Rory is from. And I have some not blood relatives, but relatives living there. And I know a very strong Republican from the States who's got I think his sister living there. But it's a very nice place. It's well
Middle
regarded.
class place where
It's
they play golf.
they play golf and they've got bloody good cars and generally speaking, people have good plenty of money. And
Yeah,
so their Catholics are now on the rise, as it were, in the north of Ireland, and there's quite a few Catholic families, and Rory's would be one of them. But the price they pay, and they may not consider it a price at all, is to say we never bothered with politics. We wouldn't have
yeah,
anything to
yeah,
do with it, or maybe the Alliance Party in a crunch. Maybe I
yeah, yeah,
might, I
yeah,
might, and when I'd feel brave and strong enough to take the step, I might vote Alliance. You know,
yeah.
that's how daring I
Yeah.
am. I'm sorry.
I don't like the unionists, but I am not a nationalist either. But anyway, Jude, here's the point. Look, on a personal level, he's a lovely fellow. Everybody
I
says
love
that
that
about him.
nice guy.
Yeah, and the other thing about him is that like I didn't watch this, so this is all secondhand. Apparently, after he won, he absolutely
Aye,
sobbed because
aye,
for
so
he says, hey, apparently he's questioned the first thing when he came at the press conference. He says, "I've got a question for you guys. What are you going to talk about next year?" Because every year he come in, he's
uh,
been there 17 years, and it's
uh,
14 years, and as it, oh, no,
uh,
11 years since he won his last big one, and
uh,
they kept saying,
uh,
"When's he going to win it? When's he going to win it?
uh.
When's he going to win it?" And for 11 times,
I
you
haven't
know.
seen this sobbing picture of him. They said sank to his knees and his body was sort of twitching and convulsed as if in a
Yeah,
seizure of some kind.
yeah.
I thought if you could get a picture of that and then put above it, poor little rich boy. He's worth
Uh,
200 million and he's lying there in the
Jude,
ground
excuse
crying.
me, Jude, hold on, let me interrupt you. That was before yesterday.
Sorry. Let me make that 250 million then, Paul.
Aye,
Or maybe
exactly.
even
Aye.
300 million.
Because Jude, the prize money is the minor, but once you've won it, can you imagine every advert? Hey,
uh,
Jude, he's a white Irish, very acceptable. Every advertiser,
Northern Irish.
Tag
Northern
Heuer
Irish.
watches,
Northern Irish.
Mercedes
No,
Benz.
no,
He will
no.
get,
Too tricky. Too
you
tricky.
know,
The Irish thing would be bad. Northern Irish is much better because that shows you're an
yeah,
even-handed kind of
yeah,
person. You're Irish, but you're
yeah.
Northern Irish, which means you could be British.
Yeah. Oh,
I think
he
when
fits every demographic for advertisers. You know, articulate, nice guy, white, whatever, good golfer. He will. Like, you can, and now Grand Slam champion.
Hmm.
Jesus, dude, that's worth at least 50 million to him.
Oh yeah, probably is a lot more. I have such mixed feelings. One of the things is Rory brings out the very worst in me because it's this kind of cautious, which way is the wind blowing, putting your
Yeah,
finger
yeah,
up and checking it out before you say anything.
yeah.
And the second thing I have against him is he plays golf. I can't stand the bloody game. I can't stand the bloody game. The only good thing
Yeah.
about golf, I think, is the 19th hole. When you get into
Uh,
I get a club. I'd
you're in
say
for a pint.
I mean, it must be very cozy. There's a golf club not far from us, and I can see people get into it, and I envy them sometimes because it must be really nice to go out there, walk within walking distance of this golf club, play a few rounds, get a breath of air, and then go in and have a couple of jars. Jeez, that'd be not bad. And you'd be getting all mates and
I
all
could,
together.
Jude,
So,
can you imagine on a cold winter Saturday morning, you go out and play 18 rounds of golf, maybe out for maybe 3.5 hours,
no, not 18
cold,
rounds, Pat. 18 holes. You'd
18,
go easy.
18 holes. Sorry, geez, if you played 18 rounds, you'd be there for a week. But I know 18 holes, and you then. By the way, there's a place literally about 5, 10 minutes from where I'm sitting now called the 19th hole.
I
It
heard
was
that.
famous.
Yeah, yeah.
It was famous in Donegal because there's two golf courses. just down the road. And
uh,
people, when they're finished, they just pulled in, had a sat beside the fire, and had a, maybe a bowl of soup and a pint again. It's
uh,
lovely, that sort
uh,
of stuff. But hey, by the way, no, I'm going to keep on going because it's on my head. Have you noticed, Jude? Oh no, the since the war in Gaza started, heard a single word of condemnation from those two great Irish liberals, Bono and Sir Bob Geldof, condemning Israel. Have you? I'm just now. I'm thinking when Rory came into my head. I was the for some reason my loose association brought the two other gentlemen into my head.
Yeah, and they only feel constrained to speak out boldly and courageously whenever it is some Irish people involved in the killing, preferably
Yeah,
Republicans, but they maybe at a stretch they do it for loyalist paramilitaries as well. But don't
yeah.
we ask them to hard things like Gaza for God's sake? That would mean
Yeah.
they'd have to oppress or make feel
Have you heard a
uncomfortable.
single word from that great humanitarian, the guy who had access to the White House when Bush was there, and was in and out with Bill Clinton, and was seen all the time, Bono? Like, I haven't heard it. Like, there's 50,000 plus people. And let me repeat, because I like saying it, because I think we should say it: 50,000 plus dead, uh, at least double that injured. Gaza basically flattened to the ground. 2.3 million people denied water, food, electricity, medicines for well over a month, and not a word from our great humanitarians.
If they keep this up, they will in fact have committed genocide. There'll be so few Palestinians around
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they won't matter. They'll have to settle
yeah,
somewhere else. Uh,
yeah.
it's sort of appalling to even think about it, you know. Tell me this, Pat. Why didn't you go back to something a wee bit trivial? Why don't you like golf?
Jim, I've tried it a couple times. I worked in the Dairy Journal,
Oh,
and the people who owned it were calling me Carls, and Frank McCarroll. He
hi.
played for
Mike
Ireland as
McCarroll
an
was
amateur.
my class in
Yeah,
Derry.
very really excellent golf. Nearly every one of the family were scratch golfers, and a
Boy.
couple of times I went out with
What
them,
does scratch mean,
and
Pat?
the
What does scratch mean?
scratch means they could go around a golf course and play at level. In other words, like I would go around and you say it's 18 holes, and you're supposed to be able to go around and 72.
Yeah.
I couldn't go around, and I would have needed about 140 to get around. They could go around no bother.
So there's no actual scratching involved.
No scratching
No, no scratch
involved.
my back, you scratch yours.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I
So
interrupted you.
they were brilliant. And so I went out a couple of times. They could hit a ball 200 yards down the fairway. I
Why?
couldn't hit it 20. So like you sort of say, what am I doing here?
Well, I wish my wife says I definitely should have taken up golf and because I liked about in the open air and it also give me exercise and it also get me to shut up when I come home when I'd be too tired to talk. Uh,
Yeah,
but I tried it. Maybe I was just I was no good at it. I suppose if I'd been brilliant at it, I would have really loved the game. But
yeah.
I was sort of average. The guys I was playing with, they were no good either, and it just
Yeah.
seemed sort of futile. The other thing
Well,
was it was an awful lot of
there's
time. Like in another
yeah.
game, if we give football 90 minutes or less, you know. But with golf, geez, you could be there for 4 hours.
There's certain people. There was a photographer in the journal I remember who never played sport at all, and we used to have organized these golf days, and he came out one day and jeepers, within a couple of years he was absolutely a fanatic about golf. I
Hmm.
don't know, and like I went out three, four, 5 times, and I thought this is just a good walk spoiled.
Exactly.
Like
Yes.
I had no interest in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
fact, I was bored shitless the whole way around. I'm saying, what
Yeah.
am I doing here? There's things I'd rather be sitting at home reading a good book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, I have to say now, golf courses that I have passed, on the road, I'd see them, or I see them on the TV. They really are beautiful. They're my idea of really nice scenery.
Aye.
I like
Mm.
Mother Nature to be tamed, to be trimmed and elegant and nice water and all. That's the way golf course. Nothing wild about the vegetation on any golf course
Aye.
if it's any good.
Yeah,
So I must say I admire that, and I sort of wish that somehow I could get a chance to walk around there. But if I did, I'd probably get a bloody ball in my head or somebody shouting four at me.
yeah, exactly.
Whatever that means. There's only one ball and they're shouting four.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
I don't get it.
Okay.
No, I'm not interested in golf in the least, Jude.
Yeah, someone else.
But it's a
If
big
you,
money sport.
if,
Like our Rory's what 35, and as you said earlier on, worth 200 million,
oh
probably
yeah,
worth 250 million this morning.
well,
Like some of these guys, what do you call it? I can't remember the guy who joined the Love Tours from down there as well. Paid someone like 100 million just to join the Love Tour,
oh,
and,
that's
and
right.
he's so
Yeah,
good I can't even remember his name.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I suppose people are drawn to these things. I'd have a hard time deciding if I had to choose between taking up a sport, to take up golf or take up Russian roulette. It'd be a really tight decision to make.
I tell you.
You know? Anyway, today this is a significant day, especially with Jeff Bezos. Do you know
Yes,
why?
aye, that all female crew led by
Yes,
his
he's sending
partner.
6 women on his Blue
Yeah,
Horizon, and one of
yeah.
them's his girlfriend or his fiance or something.
Uh,
And one of them is a woman everybody seems to know, but I've never heard of her. Well, I've heard of her, but I don't know who she is. Katy Perry. Katy
yeah,
Perry's
singer.
going singer. I might
Yeah,
not means nothing to me. But anyway, she's got up and Jeff Bezos' fiance Lauren Sanchez, they're both gonna head up into space today as part of an all-female crew. Now, how do you react to that, Pat? Are you like a male chauvinist who would say, "Oh, good heavens, there's a woman driving his truck"?
there's a certain element to that. But anyway, these women, I can't remember that they're going to go up. Apparently, there's a line. It's about 62. I can't remember the name of it. 62 miles up above the earth, and
Hmm.
apparently that's the delineation. You're after that you're in space,
Uh-huh.
and
I
apparently
think
they're
I've a
going up
notion
on
they
the.
don't go to that actually. I think they stop just short of that. I'm not
Maybe
sure.
they short anyway, but so on. Remember used to be. Remember the space explorer that blew up
Oh,
years ago.
geez, yeah. How
Remember the
could you
captain of
forget?
that one was a woman, and there were so many
School teacher,
sexist jokes. What?
school teacher.
A school teacher. Remember that blew up, and remember all the jokes, all the sexist jokes about Jesus should never let a woman drive type thing. But this here, I remember there's a girl woman. She's a big friend of what do you call her? The black girl that used to present the show, Gail King. At what do you call it? She's the most famous black presenter in America. What do you call her? I'm having a senior moment here. It's a show.
Um,
Geez, this is ridiculous. But anyway,
no, you see the woman that's got the book club.
aye, for
I
one
still
freak.
can't remember
Jesus,
her name.
she's gone off my head because
Doesn't
she hasn't
matter.
been back.
Everybody knows who we're talking about.
Anyway, Gail King was a big friend of hers. She's one of them. Bezos'S girlfriends one. Katy Perry's one. Can't remember the rest of it. So there's 6 women, and it's symbolic and so on. But there's a wee bit of it telling me it's a bloody well elitist. Here's these rich, travel like space tourists. Look what we can do, and we've got the money to do it. And look at you peasants. There's an element of that in this, dude. Why don't they say with some wee bus driver from a woman from Ohio, or somebody who's a school teacher in whatever Texas or somewhere. But it's all these rich kids. And Katy Perry said she's been dreaming of going to space for maybe after our last record she should stay there. But anyway,
Would you recognize a Katy Perry song?
not really. Like Katy Perry is a very attractive woman. By the way,
Is she?
she's had her ups and downs. I think she was married to Russell Brand, who's now been
Uh,
arrested and
I say,
on allegations of rape, if I remember
I
correctly.
didn't know that. Didn't know that. He was
Yeah,
another good actor, whether he was or not. And
yeah,
again, I would argue the
yeah,
case we should judge him on his acting, not in his private
yeah,
life. But in
yeah,
terms of this, I think it's sort of obscene. I think
yeah,
it's obscene in the same way that we have cookery programs where people, very often Irish chefs on RTE certainly, uh, who ooh and ah and taste what they've cooked. They say, "Oh, delicious." And
mm,
dreaming up new concoctions for people to try out, which they never seem to do. But there they are, oohing and ahhing on a new dish that will tickle your palate. And meanwhile, about a third to a half of the world is dying of hunger
yeah,
or suffers from malnutrition. Now, the- when is somebody going to call, stop that, stop doing that?
yeah.
It really is like saying, I don't know what it's like saying. It's like you say,
It's a cookery porn, Jude, isn't it?
exactly, exactly. Indulging in it and say, "Oh, I love this. This is
Yeah,
so good." But I mean, it's porn would be better because
Yeah.
porn wouldn't be, you wouldn't have that terrible contrast with people who are suffering from the very opposite. I suppose, there would be monks or something if you're talking about porn
Yeah.
on TV. But I find it irritating
Yeah.
to a degree. I can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to make, space travel. They're trying to push the notion of tourist space travel, and apparently Elon Musk and I guess Jeff Bezos as well. They're both going into that in a big way. They're hoping the day will come that people will be paying astronomical sums just to go up in their spacecraft and come back and say
Some
home.
people claim, Jude, I don't know how true it is, that somewhere down the line we will have to get off this planet if we keep
Yeah,
climate change keeps going the way it's going. But
yeah.
maybe that's a couple of 100 years down the road. I don't know.
Aye, aye. It's like the universe dissolving. We'll not be around, Pat, so not worry about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
let's see what else we want to talk about here. Oh, yes, this is an interesting one. Another celeb, not just Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk or Katy Perry, but U2 drummer Larry Mullen. Now, what would you do, Pat, if you were in this circumstance? You were living in a nice area and there was a chance that people you weren't that fond of might move into some of the houses around, or God forbid, some people might decide they were going to develop them and knock down the old house and build a new one. And change the sort of view from your front window of your mansion. How would you respond to that, or how would you counteract that?
Uh, well, I know how Larry Mullen's responded. He's known. He's the drummer with U2, and isn't it Killiney? Jude, is it Killiney in Dublin they're living in? And apparently,
Uh,
he's bought up
Hoth, Hoth,
all his
Hoth,
Host, is it Host? Host. It's near the.
probably the same thing.
What he's another guy's worth about 2 or 300 million.
Aye.
And apparently last year he bought the house next door to him for 2.5 million at some sort of mansion he lives in, and then he bought the mansion next door, and I think he's bought another one.
That's
And
right.
in
Another
other words, he
neighbouring known
saw
as Strand Lodge, which he is
was it a
refurbishing.
lodge? I couldn't remember the name there. So in other words, he's got three of them. So in other words, he solved the neighbour problem by buying every house in the bloody street. And I don't think they're street. I don't think it's a street as you would know on a housing estate.
As you and
It's
I
a
would know it.
it's these are gated communities. But anyway, he's bought three of them, so he's solving the neighbour problem. You'd think he could bought a good hedge and solved the problem, but Jude, I presume this is going to be some like the Kennedy compound in Chappaquiddick or whatever the hell
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hyannis Port or whatever the hell it is. These big 10 or 15 acres with 3 or 4 houses, and and big gates all around it and security guards. I presume this is what this is what you do when you're worth 200 million.
Dear God. It's in many ways it resembles the last item we were talking about, where guys are
Yeah,
spending huge amounts of money to go up into space because they can do it. They're celebs. Really, Larry's doing the same kind of thing. There's a terrible housing shortage in Ireland. There are people sleeping on the
yeah,
streets. And meanwhile,
yeah,
Larry is buying up another place called Strand Lodge, which he's going to refurbish. And he's told the planners he's going to use it as guest accommodation,
yeah,
as if there wasn't room in the house he had or the
yeah.
houses he had. Again, I love it. It's a bit like the royal family. He's talking about he demolished one of his properties called Claremont Cottage, which is probably,
A
it's
cottage,
like a
probably about
cottage.
20 rooms in it. Uh,
He
but
wanted to give
this
himself
thing,
space, he said.
yeah. But some people say, why do you have an obsession, or not an obsession, but a sort of a thing about Bono and so on. Bono, these guys who have spent years cultivating this image of the caring human beings and about looking after the poor and all the rest of it. Like Bono owns an apartment in Monaco, and apparently in the area, it's the most expensive housing in the world. I think he paid someone like 8, 10 million way back 20 years for it, but it's probably worth 100 million. A house, imagine a house worth about 100 million. So it's in Monaco anyway, the most elite, exclusive area and all the rest of it. And this the guy talks about poverty and about helping the poor and all the rest of it. And the other thing as well was they moved their center of business interest from Ireland to Holland for some tax reasons and all the rest
Oh,
of
yeah.
it. So one thing everybody slags Michael O'Leary, I'm not well fond of him myself, but one thing I admire tremendously about Michael O'Leary, he stayed in Ireland pays his tax in Ireland and pays the full amount.
uh,
So
uh, uh.
in other words, here's the hypocrisy of people like Bono. In my mind, is they say one thing and do another.
I don't like people who have too many houses. That's the long and short of it. I think one house would do. And in fact, as you know, I think in the case of the President of Ireland, one house is far too much for him. He should sell
Oh,
it.
what, there's 70 rooms or something in it, isn't there?
90
90.
rooms for a
Yeah,
man
yeah,
and his wife, and the both of them over 80. Ah, for God's
yeah.
sake, ridiculous. And meanwhile,
Aye,
I
but
would
hold on,
say,
it's not his house, Jude. Stop saying that.
he's
It's the
living in it.
Aras
The
on Outram.
state is
It goes with
spending.
the job of the president. It is
Ah,
not
get
his
away with
house.
that, Pat.
He doesn't own it, and
I know he
he'll
doesn't
have
own
to
it, but
move
he's
out when
using
he owns
it.
it.
He's using it for the last
Yeah, but
14
that's
years,
it.
rent
But he's
free.
all these. They've all these functions and all that, and it's symbol. Remember that? I remember having a go at a certain priest one time about the fact that we McFeely, what was his name? Not McFeely. What do you call it? Before Daly and Derry, your era, the bishop,
Oh, aye,
bishop,
we
whatever.
buns. Farn.
Uh,
Farn.
Farn.
Hmm.
He apparently he used to run around in a big car
Oh, he
and
did.
he'd
I
sit in the back,
remember. I
a
wrote a story
chauffeur
about it one
driven.
time.
Aye,
We
but
had
let
to
me
line
finish.
the walks. We had to line the walks, and we had to
I was
now
you,
our cheer, clap, clap, clap. And I wrote a story called "Booing the Bishop."
the
Everybody
bishop. Aye.
started to boo.
Aye. But the funny thing, I laughed at. I remember having a go with somebody about that one time. And said, oh no, Pat, you're missing the point. It was symbolic, the fact that because of the whole northern situation and the unionist control, he wanted to show people that the Catholic community, that they had power too. So he used to arrive at all these functions in a big chauffeur-driven car. Now, I presume that the symbolism of Ars and Rutran, when these foreign visitors come, they come to this magnificent place. What type of Stormont is the most impressive parliament built, I think, in Europe.
Well, it's
So,
certainly the most what do I call it? Fascist. I actually think it's an ugly. Seriously, if they say it's modelled on the type of architecture which Mussolini used when he built
yeah,
Milan train station. No, would it have been
yeah,
him? Yeah, Milan train station, and I've seen it actually, and it's the same thing. If you think about Stormont, it's big, strong pillars, and it
yeah,
stares right down your throat. And when you approach
yeah.
it, it's almost like I don't know, the suppliant coming to this massive mansion,
But Jude, it's
preferably on
deliberately
their hands
designed.
and knees.
The first time I was at the journal, and I was only in the place, and I was invited to someone in Stormont. Can't remember now, Jude. I remember it was a Friday afternoon. I was tired because we had been a very busy week. And I
Yeah.
remember, and I as well as that, I didn't know Belfast all that well. And I remember getting bloody well lost. And then the next thing I seen this massive building up on a hill, and I was thinking, Jesus, that is some building for a wee six-county state. It was absolutely huge.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, I think we can get. I have mixed feelings like you. On the one hand, it does. It's nice. Like Charlie Haughey spruced up all those buildings around the Dáil when he was in
yeah.
power, and he did a very good job. It's very nice, very attractive, I think, and it's a good. You feel proud of Ireland whenever they would have visitors to say, "Well, this is where we have our Parliament and our Senate." At the same time, the idea of spending all that money to sort of impress people, it's like people say, "Oh God, what will the visitors say if we don't make a house clean the house, put that stuff under the sofa,
Yeah.
make it look nice, get it whitewashed."
Didn't your mother have a good front room?
She did, of
Yeah,
course. Everybody
same
had a good
idea.
front room.
Yeah, exactly.
That wasn't used. I agree. It was absurd, absurd, absolutely bonkers. Uh, I think actually, especially in Ireland, where the housing crisis is horrible and people are on the streets, and a lot of people are dying because of being on the streets, that the president of Ireland should be living in a 90 plus room mansion. I just think that's wrong. I mean, if the
Yeah.
Pope can downsize, so could. I mean, Michael D does make speeches, and most of them are true, which speaks up for the poor and the oppressed in different countries. I mean, speak up by your actions in Ireland, I would say. Well, his term of office is over now, but maybe some of the candidates would run on that. They'd say, I'm not going to install myself. I'll have something
Jude,
nice, but it'll be modest.
as the president Peru gives away 90% of his salary, I think it might be Peru. he lives in a wee sort of two what a bedroom place, and he says, "I don't need the money, and I don't, I can get by."
Uh,
You sort of maybe should live by example.
yeah, that's right. You're right about that thing about the church, you know. I remember I talked to priests, a younger priest one time, and he moved to a parish and he moved into this really big house, you know. I mean, it had about four or five bedrooms. And he says, I feel embarrassed by this. He says, but this is what the people said they wanted. They insisted that the
Yeah,
Catholic Church, the priest, should have a biggish house. And the idea, of course, was to say, we're just as good as you guys. I can understand that, but it's misguided. And
yeah,
it's now the time's up, Pat. So if you're going to say
yeah.
something important, it's like a deathbed confession. Say it quick.
I'm just saying that the sun's starting to shine here, so that's lovely. That's my
Whoa,
big,
whoa.
yes.
Nice day for
Uh,
a game of golf. Maybe we would do.
yeah, yeah. Me and Rory.
Or else either that or Russian roulette. Okay?
Yeah, yeah. I think I'd go for Russian roulette. All the best, Jude.
Okay, Pat. Thanks very much. Bye.